Bhurbhuva swaha tat saviturvarenyam bhargo devasya dhimahi dhiyo yonah prachodhayatam. For those who may not be aware of this, this is the Sanskrit language, and the Gayatri Mantra is one of the most ancient prayers known to the Arya people, to the Vedic people. So with that, thank you so much for organizing this interview. I truly, truly appreciate it. I'm very humbled that you would want to speak with me and ask a few questions. And let me just very, very quickly before we start, just say something about why I agreed to do this interview. Because truthfully, I don't do many interviews. I'm not someone who, like many others, I'm not an internet personality. I'm not someone who really interacts with the public very much. But let me just say that I very much wanted to do this very specifically because of its importance historically. It is my hope that the individuals who are on here, I'm sure the vast majority of them, are very sincere, very idealistic, very good people. And it is my hope that what we're about to do now is something that historically is going to be of very great importance for the future of our world, for the future of our people, for the future of understanding what is the nature of true spirituality and its place in the world today, given the current crisis that our people are experiencing. So with that, again, thank you so much for this opportunity. And with that, please, I will let you take over, and I am simply here to serve you.
All right, thank you for your explanation. Again, I think I speak for everyone here. We're very honored to have you here. We know you're busy, so we're going to try to ask the most important questions first, and then if we'll have time afterwards, we'll move to more specific or esoteric questions. So today our main questions will focus mainly on big picture things like Dharma, duty, action, the different paths or yogas, deities, avatars, and then, as I mentioned before, we'll get into the smaller stuff like confusion on certain ideas in Vedic texts or phrasings and translations. So our first question is one of mine, and it is about doing our duty. So we want to serve our duties to the fullest and achieve a brighter future for mankind. However, those that are destroying the world can do so because they have a firm grip on it. In such an age of evil and darkness, how do we proceed? How do we move up? How do you produce perfect leaders to lead us? Is perfection something that can be cultivated in ourselves or found in others? How do we create a mini Satya Yuga within the Kali Yuga?
All right, that's many questions in one. So you may have to remind me of some of the questions, but let me begin with this first of all. The primary thing is to indeed realize the crisis that we're in. Of course, we know that the vast majority of individuals don't even know that we're going through any sort of crisis whatsoever, number one. Number two, those few individuals who do realize that we're going through some sort of crisis don't understand what the nature of the crisis even is. Thus, we have, of course, social justice warriors, we have all sorts of otherwise well-meaning individuals, but who have been persuaded to go in a very different direction, and rather than understanding the nature of the crisis and trying to do something about it, they're actually deepening the crisis that our people are experiencing. But then, finally, there are those individuals who both understand that, yes, the world has indeed gone insane, and the world is not what is meant to be, and coupled with the fact that they do understand why that is the case and what needs to be done. Now, I would assume that the vast majority of individuals who are on here right now fit into that category. They both understand that, yes, the world has gone crazy. It has become a very dark place, a very degenerate place, a very Adharmic or anti-Dharmic sort of world. And they also understand why, and for the most part, what needs to be done. For the most part. Now, all that being said, yes, what we are missing, what we have been missing up until recently, is precisely leadership. The reason why it has seemed for multiple generations now, and I'm not an extremely young man, I'm 55, but that gives me some advantage that I know decade after decade after decade precisely what has been happening. We have seen that what we have been missing has been precisely leaders. This is why for lack of a better term, the side of evil seems to be constantly winning, whereas our side does not. They have leaders. You see, they cultivate leaders. They have billions of dollars. They have institutions. They have the universities. They have everything imaginable in order to create leaders for evil, leaders for anti-Dharma. So thus, of course, they've been winning. And they've been winning for, again, several generations now. But then we see on our side, unfortunately, that yes, we're lacking qualified leaders. And what's meant by a leader, and I don't want to go too deeply into this because I speak about this in several of my videos. What it means to be a true leader is a leader in every sense of the term. It means being personally a virtuous and good individual, someone who is empowered to be a leader. It also means someone who has all the skills of a leader. We've seen that on our side, we've had very few people like this. People who pose themselves as leaders tend to always have some sort of problem or another. And, I won't go into detail. People hopefully understand what I mean. So this is precisely what we have been missing. And I've said in the past, revolutions, and there's no way around this, they start from the top down. It's a Marxist idea to think that revolutions actually start from the bottom and then somehow fix the top. No, it's the other way around. It starts with leaders. So yes, this is what we need. We have individuals who indeed now finally are rising both in America and throughout the world. And this alone is something that we need to talk about to a very, very deep extent. For myself personally, for the last several years especially, maybe the last 5 or 6 years, I've seen it as my personal duty to in fact cultivate leaders. So this is one thing that I do outside of the public eye, something that most people don't see. You don't see it on my YouTube videos or on Dharma Central or any place. Is very quietly, I have been cultivating dozens and dozens and dozens of people literally throughout the world and making them, forging them into leaders. And it's a very slow process. And more, it's a spiritual process. A person who is not spiritually rooted, a person who does not understand the transcendent, is truthfully a person who can only become a leader in the most materialistic sort of sense, not in the truly historic sense, not in the world-conquering, world-changing sort of sense. So what we need are leaders who have the strongest foundation in spirituality. So with that, can you remind me, please, of some of the other sub-questions that you had?
Yes. You actually covered most of pretty much all of it, actually. But also, if you want a specific, if you want to read over the questions, I also will be posting them in the interview channel. But the idea that leaders can be cultivated is very important. That was one of the bigger parts of that question was, can a leader, do you have to find a Chakravartin, or can a Chakravartin be cultivated?
Actually, can I answer that very specifically? Because that's a very, very important question. And it's something that people do need to understand. It actually is both. First of all, it's not the idea that we are all tabula rasa, that we're all just equal, we're all the same, and you just pick a person and you mold that person into a leader. No. People are born differently with individual skills, characteristics, etc. Leaders are born. They are born that way. They are born to lead. But at the same time, When you find an individual who is born to lead people, that person does have to be cultivated. That person does have to be educated and taught. They need to draw out into the world what is their inner nature. So certainly this is why we've even seen very tragically, I'm sure some of us have even known individuals who we've known them, we've met them, and we can just tell, oh my Lord, this person is meant to be a leader. But unfortunately, they just did not have the resources necessary in order to help them to draw that out. So they end up either not becoming a leader or something happens. So yes, leaders are born, but they also have to be encouraged to lead. So yes, they have to be cultivated.
So you talked about how you cultivate leaders in your own free time, or like you say it's a long process. Is there any advice you would give on how for us to do that, to try to cultivate our own leaders? Just because there aren't many bona fide spiritual masters there aren't a lot of people that are qualified for this sort of thing, and it can be difficult to look to any source other than sacred texts, and sacred texts and spiritual masters are really the only sources you can look to nowadays. So,
Very true. In the same way that if a person is going to eventually become a guru, they can only do that under the tutelage of a truly authentic guru. In the same way, only a true leader can really, really both recognize, but also in the correct way, cultivate individuals who are meant to be leaders. So that's, again, how it always starts. That's why I always say it starts from the top. It starts from, let's say, the top of the pyramid and then on down. First, there must be individuals who already are leaders and who have proven themselves to be such. Those are the people who can both find and cultivate individuals. And yes, it's not an easy process. In fact, let me just tell you briefly, for myself, I have seen that, again, to find such individuals, first of all, you yourself have to indeed know perfectly what it means to be a leader. What are the characteristics of a leader? And you do go through some people. You filter people out. You find individuals who, you see, of course, everyone wants to be a leader. And that's the problem. That's the nature of false ego. Everyone will immediately raise their hand. Yes, yes, I want to be a leader. I want to be a leader. But then of those individuals, only a minority really are qualified to be leaders. So first of all, you need to be able to discern and filter out who are those true individuals. And again, only someone who is a leader can do that. And then as far as cultivating, it is a matter actually of, interestingly, almost spiritual unfoldment. Again, what you're doing to create a leader is more than simply educating them from the outside and, let's say, pouring information into them. What you're doing is drawing out who they really are. Again, we're talking about individuals who really are born to be leaders. And again, in the same way that the guru draws out the true spiritual nature of the disciple, someone who is a leader can draw out the true innate leadership capabilities of someone who's born to be a leader. So the parallels between, let's say, a guru training his disciples to be a guru and a leader training others to be leaders, it's very similar. And I'm sorry to make that somewhat vague without giving specifics, but I mean, specifics we can talk about in the future, but it's a very similar sort of process. You begin with a leader. That person will create leaders.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And also, I'd say, would you say a solution, the simplest solution would be to try to expand the disciplic line of succession? So actually get out there and start doing your duty, doing in love and devotion, obviously, and try to make contact with spiritual leaders and go down that path if you think that that's your dharma, if you think that that's your nature.
Yes, definitely. In fact, actually, I would see this as a two-tiered process. First of all, before one goes outward, first one has to go inward. And for those who have not seen this yet, when you have a chance, please go to our YouTube channel, Dharma Nation, and look for this one video. It's called, or How Not to Save the World, I believe it's called. And I talk about this, about how before one actually even becomes, let's say, an activist or a preacher or a teacher or someone who wants to change the world externally, the first thing we have to do is change ourselves. And in fact, again, to use the social justice warriors as an example, unfortunately, this is the mistake that they make. As I say in that video, they tend to be 18, 19, 20 years old. They do not know anything about the world whatsoever. They couldn't tell you who was president of the United States 4 presidents ago. They know nothing. They themselves are not virtuous people. They themselves have no sense of morality, no sense of right and wrong. Their idea of history is skewed. But despite all that, all those shortcomings, they're willing to hurl themselves onto the front lines of a political war that they really know nothing about. And as a result, they themselves are victimized and they harm others. Well, what we need to do to not be like them is, first, we need to focus on ourselves, and not in a selfish way, on the contrary, in a very self-sacrificing sort of way. We need to become what we wish to see. We need to become what our end goal is. What is our end goal? It is a paradise really on earth. It is a Vedic civilization. It is a world that is governed by natural law, by natural order, a world in which sanity is restored to the world. Well, we need to personify that. That's the first thing. Then after that, yes, then we need to extend outward. We need to try to meet individuals who can be mentors for ourselves and for others who we can introduce to the world. We need to begin to network and to associate with other individuals who are like-minded, who are like us, etc. So yeah, that's the process. We need to first go inward, and then we need to explode outward.
I think this idea that before you can achieve the golden age in the world, you must achieve the golden age within yourself. It's a very important idea, and it's kind of like, if you're familiar with alchemy, the idea of as above, so below. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of kind of like how you said in when you're trying to create a Dharmic nation, you have to start from the top with leaders, and it's the same within the self. It kind of equates to that, like you have to start with the highest point within the self, which would be the soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and again, this is what makes us different from anti-Dharmic people. This is what makes us different from Marxists, from liberals, from socialists, from communists, from all of these people, to state it politically, is that they couldn't care less about self-transformation. They don't believe in a self. They don't believe in a soul. They believe that we're just meat, that we're just walking meat. That's the Marxist idea. They believe that human beings are just animals. Thus, for them, there is no inner transformation. So that's why they're such nasty people. That's why they're horrific people. And I've known hundreds and hundreds of Marxists. Yeah, they're horrific people. Whereas with us, we understand that, no, first we transform ourselves because we are an eternal soul. Because we are consciousness. Consciousness is central to everything. Once you change consciousness, then to change the world around you is easy.
So our second question is actually very related to the first one, and it is, let's see, what is the best way to find our Dharma? How do we know the best way we can serve God in an age without a caste system? And I mean Dharma as in our, not necessarily the path that we follow, like which type of yoga, but
Svadharma.
Yeah.
One's own personal Dharma. Yeah, that's a crucial question, actually. As individuals, if we want to live an ideal life, yes, we need to know our own internal Dharma, our own internal nature. The way that we do this primarily is through meditation. How do we know our own inner Dharma? It's by knowing our own inner selves. And how do we know that? It's by being meditative. It's by being contemplative. It's by being quiet as often as we can and looking within, and being very realistic and very honest about who we are. And this is what I mean by realistic and honest, is on a surface level, if everyone were just given an opportunity to just say, oh, I am such and such, you see, everyone would be a Brahmin and a Kshatriya. Everybody would want to be a priest or warrior. But the priests and warriors are a minority of people. Even in the Varna system, they're a small minority. So we need to be honest with ourselves. Some of us, some people, are actually Vaishyas. Some people are actually Shudras. And this is why we need to be honest with ourselves in looking at who we are. And if we discover that that's the case, let's say if we really look deep within ourselves and we realize, yeah, I'm not a very philosophical person when it comes down to it. I like working with my hands and etc. Well, then we're a Shudra. And the thing is, you should take pride in that. This idea of the Varna system being, let's say, a mean and vicious hierarchical sort of system is nonsense. We honor the Shudras. We honor laborers. We honor labor. That's something that's important. And we need Vaishyas, and we need warriors, Kshatriyas, and we need Brahmanas. So this is the first thing, is to truly look deeply within yourself in meditation, and honestly so. And then after some time, when you've discovered that, yes, this is my nature, I am such and such, then you have to honor that. And then comes the next step. It's one thing to understand, okay, just to pick an example, okay, I'm a Kshatriya, I am a warrior. All right, I understand that now. Now, how do I fulfill that? How do I manifest that? That's the second part. And of course, that's something else we can talk about. But yeah, that's how we discover our Svadharma, our own inner nature, is through meditation. If we want to know what is our Svadharma, that is, what is our inner nature, then that means we need to know our inner self. We need to know who and what we are. To do that, the process is meditation. And when I say meditation, I mean that in the broadest sense. I mean meditation, contemplation, just truly thinking about and contemplating, all right, who am I? What do I really like in life? What is it that gets me excited? What is it that when I think of doing this kind of activity, I just feel bliss, versus I think of this activity and, it just sounds horrible to me. In that way, through meditation and contemplation, we get to the point where we honestly begin to know ourselves. And this was the other thing I mentioned, is that we need to be honest in this process. Not everyone is a Brahmana. Not everyone is meant to be a spiritual teacher. Not everyone is meant to be a warrior. Some people are going to be Vaishyas. Some people are going to be Shudras. So we need to be honest in looking into ourselves. And let's say that we discover that, well, yeah, I'm not really a fighter and I'm not very philosophical, but I'm really, really good at making money. And we realize that long term, that has been my interest in life. Well, yeah, I'm a Vaishya in that case. And we need to be honest and accept that. And there's nothing wrong with that. All of these Varnas are necessary. Let's try to have a world without Shudras, without laborers. It's not going to work. So all these Varnas are necessary. So that's how we discover our Svadharma, our inner nature, is through meditation and contemplation.
Yeah, that also makes a lot of sense. So the next question was also somewhat related. It was a question from Yuga, actually, the organizer. Okay, so my question is, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that in the Kali Yuga, simply chanting the holy name of Lord Sri Krishna in devotional service will lead to liberation. This is a path available to many. However, Arjuna, as Kshatriya, takes the path of action as his path of liberation. Are the two paths different, or should they be treaded separately? Or should they ideally be inseparable?
Thank you very much for that question. That's a very good question. First of all, just because this is how I do everything, I'm always extremely precise, especially when it comes to anything Vedic, because dealing with anything Vedic, you need to be absolutely precise. Yeah, this is not stated in Bhagavad Gita. This is, I believe, stated in Kali Shantarana Upanishad, several other places as well. The idea of chanting or meditating upon the names of God is actually not mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. It's mentioned elsewhere. And specifically, it talks about the name of Hari. So just to be very accurate about that. However, in the Bhagavad Gita, certainly Prabhupada in his commentary, in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, certainly talks about the importance of chanting the names of Krishna and of God. Yes, this is something that is of crucial importance. At the same time, what you say is correct, that Arjuna, being a Kshatriya, that being his Swadharma, of course, he needed to engage in action. But more than this, we are all meant to engage in action. And, I wrote about this somewhat extensively in one of my books called Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way, where I talk about how in the Bhagavad Gita, even though of necessity, Krishna takes the yoga system and he breaks it up into its different essential parts and then talks about them almost as if they're different forms of yoga. At the same time, when you do a very deep reading of Bhagavad Gita, you quickly understand that these yoga systems, and specifically the main ones that he mentions, and that is karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, they're the same system. They're all the same system. So the truth of the matter is that in practicing yoga, you see, yoga in itself, what does yoga mean? It's union. It comes from the verb root yuj, which means to unite, to bring together, union. This is what yoga is. And it is meant to be practiced in such a way that it affects us as individuals on every level of our being. Thus, when we are truly Vedically spiritual people, and thus, by definition, practicing yoga, what does that mean? Well, it means that we are philosophical. Thus, we use jnana. It means that we are engaging in action. And this idea of the yogi not engaging in any action whatsoever and just kind of sitting in a cave or sitting under a tree and just doing meditation and asanas and pranayama and reading the scriptures, but not engaging in any greater activity in the world, that's a stereotype. We've seen this from the lives of great sages all throughout history, thousands of them, that some of them do that. Yes, some of them do indeed lead a very isolated life. But then you have individual rishis and yogis who they did big things in the world. They wrote books about astronomy, about sciences, about mathematics. You have yogis who engaged with kings and served as advisors to kings, etc. So yogis are meant to engage in action. And specifically, especially in the Kali Yuga, especially today in 2018, my God, we need yogis to be presidents. We need yogis to run for office. We need yogis to engage in the world in action in every way. How else is our world going to be saved if it is not by the very best of us, the very best people doing things in the world? Thus, I don't know how many people here are followers of Prabhupada. I am. He was the perfect yogi, and my Lord, at the age of 69, rather than living what to many people would be a perfect spiritual lifestyle, he was living in Vrindavana and just focusing on nothing but Krishna. But what did he do at the age of 69? No, he engaged in action. He got onto a boat, a steamship, and he came to America having 2 heart attacks along the way, and he changed the world. So yes, we're meant to engage in karma yoga, so jnana yoga, karma yoga, and then finally everything permeated with bhakti, everything permeated with devotion to Bhagavan Sri Krishna, to God. So this is the full yoga system, that nothing is left out. What it means to be a yogi is primarily, of course, we develop ourselves spiritually, but we also do so physically and mentally and philosophically. We perfect ourselves. I've said this in the past, that this is the P word. This word is anathema today. Perfection, perfect. We don't use this word today because it scares people. No, we're meant to become perfect in every way that we can. And what it means to be perfect is not following someone else's model, but we need to be perfect in ourselves. Whatever is the maximal degree that we can develop ourselves as individuals, that's the yogi. So we're all meant to do this. Now, getting to specifically the path of chanting the names of Krishna in the Kali Yuga. Yes, this is the path today. I stated a little bit more differently. I stated a little bit more Vedically. To meditate upon the names of God is the path. And that's what I teach. That's what all legitimate gurus teach. That is, you employ as mantra one of the authorized names of God given in the Vedic scriptures, whether it's Krishna or Rama or Narayana, and using an authentic mantra from the Vedic scriptures, You meditate upon that name, you take shelter of that name with great devotion. And in this age especially, this is how we achieve liberation. So yes, I hope that answered your question.
Great, that answered it.
Very good. Any other questions?
Sacred. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. So our next question is also one of mine. And I believe Zab asked a very similar question. So I just condensed, or I just went with mine because it was pretty much the same. It's about sacred marriage. So Shiva and Shakti, Rama and Sita, and many others are prime examples that marriage must be more than just regulating sex in the material world. What is the significance of marriage beyond regulation of sex?
That's a very important question, actually. And yeah, this is something that we can talk about very in depth, and something which, unfortunately, there are some misconceptions about. First of all, let me start with the most general. The foundation of any true civilization, whether Vedic or otherwise, the foundation is family. The foundation, thus, is marriage. You know, marriage, and what we mean by marriage, of course, is real marriage, marriage between a man and a woman. This is the foundation of all civilization. And with that understanding, of course, in order to have a happy civilization, you need to have a happy family. In order to have a happy family, you need to have a happy marriage. You need to have two individuals who, in most ways, if not every way, are on the same page. That means spiritually, philosophically, as far as worldview, as far as interests, etc. So yes, we're meant to find an individual who fits that bill as much as possible for ourselves. It's something that's crucial. And yes, what you've pointed out is very true. The very fact that even God is in relationship shows just how fundamental a concept this is to civilization. Thus, in Vedic spirituality, when we speak about God, we tend to speak in terms of what is called Shakti-Shaktiman. Shakti and Shaktiman, that is the feminine and masculine aspect, as being both of importance. So therefore, we tend to think not just of Krishna, but Radha Krishna in the more esoteric sense. Of course, we can say Krishna once in a while. We do, just for brevity. But truthfully, metaphysically, we think in terms of Radha Krishna, Lakshmi Narayana, and yes, even Shiva Shakti. So this is the idea that in creating these wonderful marriages, these wonderful unions upon earth, we are replicating the divine. What we're trying to do is to bring about this hopefully perfect or close to perfect combination of these two seemingly opposing elements that are actually meant to work and cooperate perfectly, that is man and woman. So yes, this is the foundation. This is why, while it will always be the case that in any form of spirituality, including Vedic spirituality, you'll always have some individuals who are completely celibate. So thus you'll have brahmacharis and sannyasis. Those are the two celibate orders in Vedic spirituality. Those people will always be a minority. There'll be individuals who are called to that path. But the vast majority of people, including people who are extremely spiritual and even yogis, they will be married. And again, this is another stereotype. And let me just end by saying this, because this is something that I've spoken about for decades, actually. This is a stereotype, the idea that married people cannot be fully yogis or fully spiritual or completely dedicated to self-realization and God-realization. That is a myth and a lie. And in fact, I've pointed this out to people, and I challenge people, anyone listening to me right now, look at the lives of the vast majority of rishis. And I'm talking about rishis. I'm not talking about, some guru who lived 200 years ago. No, I'm talking about people who are spoken about in the Vedic scriptures. Look at their lives. What are you going to see? The vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of these rishis were married. They were married as they were rishis. So again, this points out the fact that, yes, being married, again, in a good Vedic relationship, and we can, in the future, we can go much deeper into what's meant by that. This is the foundation of Vedic civilization and of all civilization. Does that answer your question?
I wanted to ask Zav if that answered your question. It did, okay. So our next question is another one of mine. I asked a lot of questions. It is, what is the benefit of praying to and meditating on the demigods when you can simply meditate on Krishna? Do you receive the benefits of meditating on all the demigods if you meditate on Krishna, as they are part and parcel of him?
Yes, that is true. Again, this is something that has to be understood in a very, very nuanced sort of way. Because while on the one hand, philosophically, that is true, that if one meditates upon Krishna, then truthfully, yes, you get all the benefits that you would in meditating upon or appealing to any of, let's say, the lower gods, the demigods. That's true. But this is also the problem. How many people are fully meditating upon Krishna as of now? So in other words, you have to eventually get to that point. And in the meantime, as you are on the path, as you are coming to the point of being in what technically is called Samadhi. This is what Samadhi is. Samadhi is not some crazy impersonal trance. What Samadhi is absorption of one's attentive awareness upon Krishna, where the mind is completely focused upon Krishna. You are meditating upon Krishna perfectly and continuously. That's real Samadhi, not the impersonalist sort of idea. But this is the thing. Between here and there, as we are getting to that point of being in perfect meditation upon Krishna, we need to reach out for as much help as we can finally have, as we can truly have. So this is the thing. There's nothing wrong with also appealing to demigods, just as long as we understand the nature of those demigods. See, this is the thing. In our path to Krishna consciousness and ultimately knowing Krishna perfectly, don't we also appeal to other people, even in the material world? We need to renew our driver's license. We go to the DMV. I can give a million examples where we take help from other people. We take help from family, even for material things. We take help from the guru for spiritual things, etc., etc. And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with accepting help from others as long as you understand, okay, this bureaucrat at the DMV is helping me right now to renew my license, but this person's not God. Or I had an opportunity to actually meet with my congressional representative because I had some problem, and the person helped me. Well, that's wonderful. I got some help. That person's not God. That person's not Krishna. So in the same way, if, let's say, Saraswati were to appear to us and say, you are such a wonderful devotee of Krishna that I have decided to give you a boon that you will be able to know all of the Vedas perfectly and effortlessly. What are we supposed to do? Say thanks but no thanks, get away from me, you're not Krishna? No, of course not. In fact, that would be displeasing to Krishna, because that would be extremely rude to someone who is a goddess. So no, of course we take help from whoever will offer it, while at the same time always keeping our eyes on the goal and understanding that my goal is not to now just focus on Saraswati or Surya or Chandra or any of these demigods. No, our goal is Krishna. But this is the thing. If I'm sincere, anyone who will help me toward my goal to know Krishna, that person's my friend. So we need to be very, very hospitable and have very good etiquette when it comes to the demigods, but just always understanding the demigods are not God. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So we've got a lot of requests for a very specific question, and it is actually Hyperborean. Do you want to ask this question yourself? Oh yeah, there's no mic. So I'll ask it. You have stated clearly in your videos that the last full avatar on this earth was Sri Krishna over 5,000 years ago. Some claim Buddha avatar came before Siddhartha / Gautama Buddha. Others claim Balarama to be the ninth avatar. Has the ninth avatar of Vishnu descended upon this earth yet?
Yes, that's the traditional understanding that that has always been there. I know currently there's a little bit of confusion as to, for example, Buddha. Well, was he an avatar? What about this person? What about that person? No, the traditional understanding is that there is Krishna. Then the next full Purna Avatar will indeed be Kalki. At the same time, in order to understand this and why there's so much confusion, we need to understand the nature of avatars. An avatara is not an avatara is not an avatara. There are different kinds of avatars. So, for example, what we're talking about primarily are what are called Purna Avatara. That is, let's say, for lack of a better term, pure avatars. That is God himself in his full form coming upon the earth. That's a Purna avatar. And again, the next one will be Kalki. He won't be here for over 400 and something like 420,000 years from now. At the same time, there are what are called Avesha avatars. Sometimes they're called Shaktyavesha avatars. You hear both terms in the Sanskrit literature, in the Vedas. And these are individuals who are empowered by God. The Buddha was one such individual. And there are others as well. There are others who are named in the Vedic scriptures. There are others that we simply know because they fit the description of Avesha avatars. But the Buddha was one such individual. That's why sometimes, in accordance with the scripture you look at, sometimes he's simply called an avatara. In other cases, it's more specific that he was an Avesha avatar. Yeah, so that's the understanding, is that, let's say, the last avatara of significance, without the strict numerical sequence coming into play, the last Purna avatar of significance was Krishna, who was here a little bit over 5,100 years ago. He is the avatara of the Kali Yuga. We are meant to worship Krishna. We are meant to follow the Bhagavad Gita, etc. The next one will be Kalki, but in between, there are many Avesha avatars. Many of us, including myself, believe that Prabhupada was an Avesha avatar. I very much believe that he was an individual who was empowered by God. It's not that he was God, but he was empowered by God to the point where you can take his words as if it's the words of God. That's what it means, Avesha avatar. But in addition, there have been others. Jesus was an Avesha avatar. Prabhupada, without using that exact terminology, pointed to that Jesus also is our guru, etc. So, yes, that's the distinction. And there are other kinds of avatars too, not just Purna and Avesha, but those are the two most important. Does that answer your question somewhat?
Yes, it does. Well, it was Hyperborean's question, but I can see that it answered it.
Very good.
So also there's this idea that it's related to that question, that a devotee, a true devotee, is actually called a demigod, like Devi or Deva Devi.
Yes.
Like a title that's attributed to them. Obviously more than a title, but people often think of demigods as powerful beings, cosmic beings, like Shiva, like Brahma, like Indra. But I suppose the answer to that question actually clarifies that to be a devotee is to be a demigod, but to be I suppose some of them, like Prabhupada, for example, are given, I suppose, boons. You say, like boons from other demigods or from God Himself.
Both. Yes.
So yeah, that clears up a lot of confusion around the whole idea of demigod, because that had confused me in the past.
The idea of deva is a little bit fluid. Basically, it means, what is a deva? It means an individual who is extremely pious. You could say this in the most general of senses. If you look at the devas, how did they become devas? Well, in a previous life, they were completely pious. And we're talking about generic devas, for lack of a better term. We're not talking about a being who is more like on the level of Shiva or someone like that. We're talking about, let's say, the inhabitants of Svarga, of the heavenly realms. These are generic devas. Well, how did they become that? Well, they were pious individuals. They accumulated a lot of good karma. Some of them were more overtly spiritual than others. That is, a lot of them, they were all religious. But at the same time, devotees are indeed special, whether in the human realm or the deva realm, in that these are the most spiritual of people. By devotees, I mean bhaktas. These are the most spiritual of people in any given group of individuals, in any given society. So thus, even among the devas, you have some, which I'll use this term again, they are generic devas. That is, they're good people, they're powerful, they can benefit us, they can give us boons, etc. But even among the devas, they're not all devotees. Some of them are impersonalists, some of them are different things, but they're all religious. But then among the devas, then you'll have some individuals who are devotees. So for example, Yamaraja is a devotee. Then you have someone like Indra, who's not so much a devotee, etc. So you have different kinds of individuals. But devotees themselves, that is, individuals who are completely devoted at the feet of Bhagavan Sri Krishna, that individual is considered to be king in any society, whether among humans or among the devas. Even the devas will honor such a person, and that's why, yes, they're called deva. So thus, my primary initiatory guru, his name was Bhakti Rakshaka Sridhar Deva Goswami. So yes, among devotees are considered to be the greatest in any society.
Thanks for your answer. That does clarify that, or the confusion that I had. So my next question is kind of similar to that as well. It is why is it that praying to / meditating on different avatara is used for different purposes when they are all the same being? An example would be praying to Narasimha for protection.
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, that's an important question, and this is a way of understanding this. The radical personhood of God has to be honored. So thus, while on the one hand, I'll just state this philosophically, on the one hand, ontologically, all of the avatars are the same. They are all manifestations of God. So yes, one could easily say, oh, then it doesn't matter. They're all interchangeable. But at the same time, from God's perspective, why did God choose to come as one avatar versus another versus another? See, this was his choice. And thus, in honoring him and being a devotee of God and God being a person, we also have to recognize that, yes, while God is one, God can choose in accordance with his mood, in accordance with the lila that he wants to display, in accordance with the aspect of his personality that he wants to bring to the fore. We need to honor the fact that, yes, Narasingha is different from Rama to some degree, and Rama is different from Krishna, and Krishna is different from Parashurama, and on and on and on. So, yeah, this is one of the richnesses of Vedic spirituality, is that it reconciles things that seemingly seem to be in conflict with one another, but in actuality is not. God is one. Ekam. God is one. We all recognize that. Vaishnavas, devotees of Krishna, individuals following Vedic culture, we recognize that God is one, but this is also the richness. God has also unlimited forms. And God can display unlimited aspects of his personality. And when we truly understand what is the nature of God, how could it be any other way? That of course he's unlimited, and we have the ability to relate to God in unlimited ways. So therefore, yes, some of us will be more attracted to Rama, some to Krishna, some to Balarama, some to Narasingha, etc., etc. So it's all part of the richness of this culture and the richness of understanding the nature of God and our relationship with God.
Yeah, that also cleared that up a lot. it reminds me of kind of like how when you think of going to the heavenly planets or dying, even just dying, and leaving your loved ones. I used to think that it would be sad because you wouldn't get to see them again, or you would lose that connection. But then you remember that since God is the ultimate source of all that is good and beautiful, everything good that you felt, all love that you felt towards your family and friends and children, basically everyone in your life that you cherish, is ultimately comes from God. So it makes it easier, or it makes it actually desirable, almost. But yeah, that cleared up my question.
Yeah,
my confusion.
You know what's a nice way of understanding this? That is our relationship with family and loved ones versus the relationship that we have with God. It's not a matter of one or the other. It's a matter of priorities. So in other words, yeah, this is another stereotype that people have. That let's say you're a devotee and you're married to a wonderful woman who also is just goodness personified and supportive, and also a devotee and someone who, you truly love and who loves you. That love is not meaningless. That love is not meaningless because you are loving a devotee. You're loving someone who is a good person. And to have to leave the company of any good person actually is a cause of sadness. At the same time, it's a matter of priorities and perspective. The priorities being this: understanding that, yes, you can have multiple relationships, but at the same time, your relationship with God is primary. It's not a matter of, I'm going to love only Krishna, everything else is Maya, everything else is evil. This good woman who I'm married to, it doesn't matter. No, that's not a very mature way of seeing things. It's a matter of priority. That yes, I love these good people in my life, but my love for God is the priority. That's the most important thing, and I'm focused on that. That's the most important thing. So it's not a matter of just some sort of black and white, well, everyone else is Maya, every relationship that I have. No, if you have relationships with, again, truly good people, those are relationships of value. Thus, we have relationships certainly with God, but also with Guru, also with other spiritual mentors, other mentors of any description. We have relationship with our loved ones, with good friends, with other devotees. They all have to be honored, but at the same time, in the proper perspective and priority. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, we're meant to love each other. This is not a joke. This is not Maya. This is not something that's a New Age concept. We're meant to truly love each other. Now, it doesn't mean that we replace God with each other. You see? No, we love God first, but we also love each other in relationship to God. Otherwise, what are we doing? What is this form of spirituality where we claim we only love God, but we don't love God's devotees, who might be our friends, our family? No, we love. We're meant to love.
Yeah, that's a very good perspective, I guess. Or like it makes understanding our relationship with others and God, or relationship with others in relation to God, much clearer. So the next question was, over time, among the Vedic tribes, the supreme deity was often argued. In certain tribes it was Varuna, others Indra, until eventually the godhood was realized as Vishnu. Does this development invalidate the other great deities?
Several things to be said. First of all, we need to talk about Vedic times very specifically. And what I mean by Vedic times is the last Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and the Yugas preceding that. When we talk about the Vedic era, really what that means is the era right before the Kali Yuga, when people had a better and more proper understanding of these various concepts. Now, all that being said, let me say this. This idea of there being contention as far as who is the supreme absolute, who is the summum bonum, who is the supreme being, the supreme deity, etc. That which is the absolute, that which is, to state it Vedantically, Brahman. Truthfully, there's been very little, if any, contention about this in Vedic times. This is a more modern thing. And when I say modern, to me, that means the last 5,100 years, not the last 10 years. This is a more modern thing, that now you have so-called Shaktas versus so-called Shaivas, versus this, versus that, versus Vaishnavas, versus, oh, I'm going to pick a god or a goddess that I like and say, oh, this is the supreme. This is something that you found historically increasing throughout the history of the Kali Yuga specifically. Previous to this, there wasn't a lot of contention. Certainly a little bit, because there's always contention about things. But if you're talking about the Vedic era, that is previous to roughly 5,100 years ago, no, it was always understood that the Supreme was Narayana, was Krishna. And the reason why that was understood was because that's what the scriptures said. Now, at the same time, having said this, yes, there have always been, even in Vedic times, different tribes, different individuals, even different semi-nations, nations in the proper sense of that term, not merely meaning bordered, bounded states, but meaning nations of peoples, who, of course, certainly had their prevailing deity. That was the deity of their people. So this is why, if you go back to ancient times, you'll find that different temples, ziggurats, etc., that were dedicated to a specific deity. If you could look at all of the ancient polises, the city-states were all Vedic, whether Greek, whether early Roman, whether Mesopotamian, etc., etc. And they would have a temple, and the temple had the deity of their people as represented, in iconic form. So therefore, yes, of course, you had different individuals who had their tribal deities. But at the same time, philosophically, it was always understood that ultimately there was one supreme being. And then dealing with the overtly Vedic civilization, Vedic tribes, Vedic peoples, etc., it was always understood who this being was, that it was Narayana, to state it in Vedic terms. Today we would say Krishna. So there wasn't a lot of confusion about this. Again, this is something that you find increasingly beginning at the very start of the Kali Yuga. For that matter, even the idea of sects and denominations did not exist previous to the Kali Yuga. Arguably, the first denomination, the first sect to begin in the Kali Yuga was that of Zoroaster, Zoroastrianism. Previous to that, people didn't think in terms of sects. They did think in terms of tribes. And yes, this is the presiding deity of our tribe who represents us, who we like as a people. But the idea of denominations did not exist previous to Zoroaster. Persia, Iran was Vedic at one time, and he created the first denomination where he created a sect that was somewhat different from the original Vedic. And then from there, of course, then you have Judaism, and then you begin having, in the Asian context, eventually you had Buddhism, not founded as a sect by the Buddha, but that came later as a result of Ashoka. See, even the Buddha, never claimed that what he was doing was Avaidika, was anti-Vedic. He never said that, and the first few generations considered themselves to be part of the traditional civilization, as other people always also consider them to be. So in other words, if you spoke to, let's say, Brahmanas a generation or two after the Buddha, and you asked them, oh, what do you think of these people, these Buddhists, they would just say, oh, yeah, they're just a different aspect of our culture. The idea of sectarianism with Buddhism began, again, with the Emperor Ashoka. So this is going very, very much in depth, maybe too much. But again, the idea of denominations is a recent thing, only in the Kali Yuga. Now, of course, the further the history of the Kali Yuga goes on, now we're in 2018. Does anyone know how many sects there are? I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you there are tens of thousands. In fact, arguably, just in Christianity alone, there are at least 10,000 sects. That I know for a fact. So yes, this idea of contention as far as who is God, etc., that's not something that was of much concern in Vedic times. So I can go infinitely deeper into this topic, but just due to lack of time, I hope that at least begins to answer that question somewhat.
Yeah, it does. I feel like it can almost be a saying now, only in the Kali Yuga.
Oh, yes. Absolutely, yes. There are, oh my God, there are things that have occurred in the Kali Yuga, and not just in the Kali Yuga, but specifically, let's say since roughly 1945, that have occurred that you have to say, yes, only in the Kali Yuga. People previous to the Kali Yuga could not even imagine such things. And I won't go into detail, but just the sorts of degeneracies and the sorts of control mechanisms that evil people have over society, and just on and on. These things would be inconceivable during Vedic times. Yeah, we're living in a very, very different time. And the thing is, as I say that, I always have to give this caveat, because there are skeptics who will always say, well, everyone, regardless of when you live, whether you're in the 19th century, 18th, everyone thought they were living in a different sort of time. No, that's not true. First of all, you can see just objectively that very often that wasn't the case, that the further back you go, you see that society really didn't change all that rapidly. It took a long time. But for a variety of reasons that, again, I won't go into just due to lack of time, the time that we're living in today, 2018, is like no other time in at least known history, recorded history. There have been times that have been similar. I would say maybe something equivalent would be the era of the Mahabharata War. But let's say for the last 5,000 years at least, we have never lived in a time like this, where Dharma itself has been so under attack to the point where it practically has disappeared. There is no Dharma nation on the earth today, and I've pointed this out as a marker. This is a marker. There have always been Dharma nations, that is, nations in which their government at least tries to rule in accordance with Dharma. There have always been such nations, always, until recently, until just the last maybe 20 years. Even Nepal, up until when the king was overthrown, was officially a Dharma nation. That may have been the last one. You can argue that the Dalai Lama is the titular head of a Dharma nation in exile, but it's in exile, so it doesn't have any real power. But we have never lived in an era like this where you cannot point to one nation state that is ruling in accordance with natural law. So we are in a very dark period of the Kali Yuga, where, to almost bring this full circle, we have been lacking leaders. Well, right now we're on the precipice. And I think many people know this. I've been talking about this forever. I have a half dozen videos where I talk just about the coming golden age. People know this, I think. People are intuitively beginning to understand we are on the precipice, and what we have seen has been horrific, and most people don't even know how evil, how fully evil have been the people who have been ruling over us and what they've actually truly done to us. Most people don't understand the full picture of how evil these people are, number one. Number two, a lot of people, some people still don't quite grasp that, yes, we're about to enter into a mini golden age. Brahma Vaivarta Purana talks about this. Prabhupada mentioned this many times. Many other sages mentioned that we're about to enter into a mini golden age that will last for 10,000 years. And it is about to begin. I mean, literally, it is about to begin. And what that means is that now more than ever, we need to have those leaders who will help to usher us into that golden age. We have some now. We're beginning to. We have been blessed that we are going to see things that most of the people on our planet today can scarcely even believe will happen. We're going to see the beginning of a golden age. But we also have to help it to come about. That's why everyone who's listening to this now, everyone who's listening to my voice, let me just say this as kind of an ending to all those who are listening. What you're doing is more important than you know. What is happening now in history is more important than we fully understand. We have an opportunity to quite literally make history. We have an opportunity to do something in our own lives through our own choices that is epic. You know, we read these epics, we read the Mahabharata, we read Lord of the Rings, and we hear about these great heroes of the past. We truly, each of us as individuals, we have the ability to be such heroes. We have the ability to bring this world from the present darkness that it is in to light, to true light. We have the ability to help the innocent. We have the ability to bring goodness back to this world. We have the ability to bring truth back to this world. Not necessarily each of us just as an individual, but all of us together, forging ourselves as the leaders that our world is crying out for, has been crying out for generations. We owe it to the world to, in all humility, become leaders and bring about this restoration of sanity that the world so much needs. So again, I want to thank you for organizing this group and for inviting me to come on. And it's been my pleasure speaking to you. And let's please do this again as soon as we can and as often as we can.
Yes, I definitely agree. I mean, as always, your insight and your wisdom have been very enlightening. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this. And also, yeah, definitely, we should definitely do this again. I'm not sure what time would be best for you, but yeah, definitely that closing. I think everyone has had a similar experience where reading The Lord of the Rings, I'm pretty sure most of us have read it. You feel like nostalgia almost of an age lost, or like a time that you wish you could live in, something that could yet become in the future, and it brings a lot of hope to hear this from you, that their perfection is possible. All the heroes and the legends, achieving virtue like that is possible. There is absolute good, and it's not just an empty, dead world that has no value or meaning. It means a lot to us, and yeah, we should definitely do this again. Thank you for your time, and I guess namaste. Can't wait to do this again. Very looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you again. And just, I have no choice. I have to just quickly comment on what you said about Lord of the Rings. For those people who don't know or who haven't seen this yet, you know, I'm sure you probably know this. I gave a talk on Lord of the Rings. It's available as a video. It's called Lord of the Rings, Dharma and Modernity. It's over an hour long, where I talk about Lord of the Rings from two things, from the Vedic perspective, but also from a very practical perspective, because I truly believe that Lord of the Rings, and I've both seen the movies. I don't want to tell you how many times. At least once a year, I see the entire three films, the unedited version. But I've also read the book as well, and I truly believe that Lord of the Rings is talking to us, literally in 2018. Literally. And if we truly want to have a nice understanding of the struggles that we are experiencing, what we need to do, the sort of people we need to be, what is the nature of our enemy, read Lord of the Rings, and you'll have a very, very good understanding. We're in a war. We're in an absolute war of good versus evil right now. And there is no gray. There is zero gray. It's good versus evil. And very quickly, we've seen that people have taken sides. That's why there's been so much polarization. People are either social justice warriors or, they're nationalists. And there is no in-between. We cannot afford an in-between. So this is what Lord of the Rings also tells us. This is also what Bhagavad Gita tells us. Choose your side. Choose your side. Arise and fight. And fight fearlessly. And that's what we're called upon to do. So with that, Yes, I will let you go. Let's definitely arrange to do this again. It would be my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for organizing this. Namaste.
Namaste.
For Frodo.